Good to go, sir.
President, sir.
Yeah, shall we start?
Okay.
Welcome. Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all for the 13th edition of Pudukkottai Bowden. I invite our Secretary, Dr. Periyasamy, to welcome the chairperson and speakers and the audience. Over to Dr. Periyasamy.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Periyasamy, even
Yes,
without,
sir. Yes, progress.
without a slide share, you can.
Visible and audible, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Good evening to everybody. On behalf of ISA Pudukkottai, we are conducting regularly on every Wednesday Pudukkottai Bowden online CME program, specifically charted for PGs and consultant anesthesiologists to refresh themselves. For PGs, it is charted out for on examination point of view. So in this program, again, every week we are welcoming so many people. This week we are having special guest, and I welcome once again. I welcome you all. And here we are having our academic chairman, Dr. A.L. Meenachandram sir, back one of these events, and he is coordinating all the group and corner of this event, and success mainly because of him only. So credit goes to him only. I welcome you, sir. And every week we are conducting this program with the help of our president, Dr. Suresh Kumar, President Dr. David, and our association members, city branch members, colleagues of Pudukkottai city branch, and overwhelming response was given in the past events and in future also. Delegates from all over the country, I welcome you all. In this program, we are having Dr. Sri Priya, additional professor, All India Institute of Medical Science, Mangalagiri, Andhra Pradesh, as chairperson. I welcome you, madam. And the well-known speaker, Professor Dr. C.L. Gurudat, Professor in the Department, Anesthesiology, JSS Medical College, Mysore. Sir is going to deliver about anesthesia machine to workstation. I welcome you, sir. We are eagerly waiting for your lecture, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Dr. Anup NR as Professor, JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, Mysuru. Sir is going to talk about fitting out sparing and Suprascapular Block. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Next speaker, Dr. Anita or resident JSS Medical College, Mysore. Madam is going to talk about preoperative investigations in the ISA 2022 guidelines. Welcome you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
With this introduction note, these are chart prepared by me, and already we conducted these topics for the past 2 months from 23/3/22 to till date without any break, with good response from our all over the nook and corner of this country. I thank for the successful program and participants who already participated and make us to continue this program without any break. And one more thing, we are having very good response for medical council credit hours. I already mentioned about these important points. Once again, it is my duty to explain the important points. First one is you have to send the mail to ISA Pudukkottai at yahoo.com. Details required are your email ID, mobile number, address screenshot, and 100 rupees without forgetting 100 rupees left to account number. That's 38568596 298. Is more important. Without this money, you can't get credit hours. Once again, bank details. Pay 100 rupees left to account number 38568596 298. SB Annavasal, branch code 04883. And important address, the email ID, you have to send your important details to ISA Pudukkottai at yahoo.com. ISA Pudukkottai at yahoo.com. 100 rupees net. And details records are email ID, mobile number, address screenshot, name registered in the medical council, concerned medical council. These are the most important details required for credit hours. And next one is Boyle's apparatus. I used to enter the theater in my 30 years of experience. First, I pray Boyle's as a God. After that, only I used to do all other things. So it is my first and foremost thing to respect in the operation theater. Boyle's is a small poem about this Boyle's. Boyle's made a revolution in the medical field, medical world after the Second World War. Found the solution to the surgical field. Boyle's always under pressure. That is to relax the anesthesiologist and to rebreathe the patients. Boyle's wear the colored cylinders as ornaments. Flow through the throat and bobbins. Boyle's moves on wheels with alcohol. Boyle's moves on wheels with alcohol to feel and then to heal as protocol. Boyle's God within the operation theater. Boyle's God within the operation theater. Hold the soul within the heart. Hold the soul of everyone inside the theater within the heart. With this, I thank everyone for this opportunity. I welcome you once again. I welcome you all. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Periyaswamy. Thank you for your poem also regarding Boyle's.
Thank you, sir.
Dear Secretary, respected Academic Chairman, Professor Dr. A.L. Meenachandram, sir, our Treasurer, Dr. David, ISA Pudukkottai branch members, respected Professor Dr. C.L. Gurudat, sir, who is going to speak on the session 1, respected Dr. Sripriya, madam, who is going to chair the second session, respected Dr. Anup, Assistant Professor from Mysore, and Dr. Anindita from Mysore, friends, delegates, postgraduate students who are assembled here. I welcome again for this 13th edition of our Pudukkottai Budan, weekly webinar program conducted by our ISA Pudukkottai branch, which is a branch of the Tamil Nadu State ISA. Every week, the Pudukkottai Budan has got much attention, and the attendance was very above 100 plus. Thanks to all the attendees for sticking on to the schedule and giving support to us in the form of attending the webinar. At the outset, Pudukkottai Bowden was able to deliver variety of lectures and variety of speakers. Today's speakers, our Gurudat sir, is very important for us because we have to travel to Mysore, JSS Medical College, to hear the lectures. But we are able to sit here in our home, and some people in the theater, some people in the while you are traveling, they can hear our Gurudat sir lecture. Thanks to the post-COVID era, which has made this webinar very easy and practical. Our every program needs some power. Power is called Shakti in Tamil. So our Meenachi is the god of Shakti, and our Professor Meenachi Sundaram is the Shakti for us to run the show. I once again thank for our branch, for our Professor A.L.M. sir. I welcome everybody once again. I sincerely request everybody to enter in their name, use the credit hours, attend the webinar in full length, and kindly take part in the discussion, which will be very useful. And at the end of our webinar, and your questions and your chat box will be well addressed by our chairperson and our professor sir. And lastly, I want to congratulate our ALM sir for making every webinar a resident to present a topic here, so that they are getting boost of their confidence, and they are also presenting the webinar in front of the professors as well as the whole country, which is a very good opportunity that everybody cannot get it. I once again thank Dr. Anindita Madam for using this opportunity. I welcome overall participating the postgraduates to take part in this webinar in the future. Thank you. Thank you. I hand over the proceedings to our academic chairman, Dr. A.L.M. sir. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh Kumar, President, respected President, Secretary, and Treasurer, members of Pudukkottai ISA, the faculty, Dr. Sri Priya Madam, Dr. Gurudat, Dr. Anup, and Dr. Anindita. Today, it is totally an informal picture. Again, all of us know why it has become informal is because Dr. Gurudat is here. Routinely, I used to introduce the speakers just because I know them personally, but now I need not introduce Dr. Gurudat. Anyway, I will take it in the opposite direction, how to introduce Dr. Gurudat. Gurudat, even though I like him, we are a pair of contrasting characters. Whatever he is, I am nothing in that. For example, he is handsome, I am not. He is knowledgeable, I am not. He is a very good teacher, I am not. He is a strict disciplinarian, I am not. So he will be very sincere in his duties.
Sir, you are failed to address our hairstyle, our professor's hairstyle.
So sir is handsome. That is the first thing I said. And routinely I ask him what is the secret behind that. He never reveals that. And he used to get up at 5 o'clock early morning. I have never seen 5 o'clock in my lifetime because it is 8 o'clock only. Even I may go to sleep at 5 a.m. But it is surprising. He is a military man. I am not a military man. Even though he is a military man, he will not go into the details which the other anesthesiologist looking for. But he used to give it to others. He may not use that opportunity. As a military man, he is having a lot of exposure to the materials, but he will not use it. So he is such a nice man. He is a born teacher. He lives like a teacher. He has dedicated his life for teaching. That is the reason why many people are here. And the Boyle's apparatus, actually, we wanted to start this webinar with Dr. Gurudat with that Boyle's apparatus, as Boyle's apparatus is a hero for anesthesiologist. But at that time, for some other reason, we could not make it up. But even if that lecture is repeating, see, we used to listen to SPB's song repeatedly. How many times you have listened to SP Balasubramaniam? How many times you have listened to Rahman's music? So everything is entertaining. So we used to hear often, and I am surprised. See the way he has collected the messages about the Boyle's apparatus. It is phenomenal because all his teaching expertise for so many years, more than 30 years, he has collected the material and he has put it in a nutshell. And again, I want to tell, because Gurudat sir is the first speaker who is going to represent this webinar twice. He is the first one. He is the first one. So far for these 12 webinars, we had 48 faculty. Now it is 52 faculties we are having. And out of this 52, Dr. Gurudat is the first one. He is going to participate in the next webinar also, because I purposely requested him to have this Boyle's apparatus lecture into 2 parts. So he has divided into 2 parts for the benefit of attendees. I want to tell this beforehand. Next week also he is continuing this Boyle's apparatus. So he is covering part 1. He is going to part 2 in the next webinar. So we are happy to have him. And next, we wanted the assistant professor. Routinely, we wanted to have one assistant professor and one resident, and Dr. Anup. Probably he may become the future Gurudat in appearance. Possibility is there from JSS Mysore. And see, we are very happy that he is one of the expert in truncal block. It was not said by me, it was said by Dr. Gurudat. So when the teacher's teacher is branding him, the words from the mouth of the person coming, it is important. And I want to inform Dr. Anup that Dr. Gurudat appreciated you. Probably he may not appreciate you straight away. That is a good part of the teacher. He will not encourage the students straight away. But behind your back, he is talking good things about you. So he told a lot about you. So we expect you to come up like that. He has finished, Dr. Anup has finished his MBBS from Devarajas Medical College. For that, I was a Senate member actually. Then he finished his MD from JSS Mysore. So he is interested in ultrasound guided regional analgesia. So that truncal block is a good part for him. And he is moreover, he is interested in obstetric and pediatric anesthesia also. But today's heroine, the youngster, Dr. Anindita, she is a real heroine from JSS Mysore, because I heard a lot about her. Even Dr. Gurudat sir may not be knowing about it, even though she is a student. See, she belongs to, I'll take some time because resident is important for us. Okay. She is native of Hyderabad, but brought up in Chennai, now living in Karnataka. So she is well versed with all the languages in the southern part of India. So in that way, she is good one part. Number 2, she is a prodigy of JSS Mysore, which is a renowned medical college. And more than that, she is having a lot of extracurricular activities. That's what I want to inform all anesthesiologists to lead a stress-free life. We have to have extracurricular activities. Dr. Anindita is very good at canvas painting. That we should know. He is good at the canvas painting. So I request before she finishes her course, she has to paint Dr. Gurudat in canvas painting, and you have to hand it over as a gift to sir when you are leaving. And more than that, not only that, she is a sportswoman. She is an athlete. She is an athlete. The details we collected actually, she is an athlete. She is a basketball player. The height itself says, straight by standing, she can put the basket in the thing. So she's a basketball player. She's a hockey player also. See, she's a hockey player also. So she can play with the stick. So the spouse should be very careful. She can play with the stick also. We have to note that. And she represented national. But unfortunately, after joining a postgraduate course with dedication in JSS Mysore, she has put a temporary full stop for all these extracurricular activities. So once it is over, she has to shine in extracurricular activities also. I wish her all the good luck, and we are happy to have her as a faculty. And again, she was introduced by Dr. Gurudat sir. Again, we are very much careful about the chairperson every time, and we want to have a chairperson who is having a day-to-day experience in that particular field. So Dr. Sri Priya Madam, who is a associate professor in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Mangalagiri, and she was interested in bile apparatus as well as truncal block. So immediately we fixed her, but the moment we said the name of Dr. Gurudat, she backtracked. She said, I cannot be a chairperson for SAR. That is the first point. Then what I thought, this is the first time we have devised the webinar flyer in such a way. Dr. Gurudat's lecture is kept as a separate part. It is session 1, and session 2 is going to be chaired by Dr. Sri Priya. Madam was very particular in that, and she owes a lot of respect to Dr. Gurudat sir. And again, Madam is interested in bile apparatus and truncal block, and she has a lot of national and international publications. Usually, people from Mahatma Gandhi, Pondicherry, and this All India Institute people, they will be publishing only papers. Continuously, they will be publishing papers, and we people will be reading that paper. So that is how we are benefited. We are following. It is better to listen than to read. So we want to listen to the topmost faculties, and the entire country is watching you, sir. It is available in a recorded version in YouTube also. Immediately the YouTube link also will be shared. So now I hand over the session to Dr. Sri Priya Madam. Anyway, session 1 is automatic, Dr. Gurudat sir. Thank you.
Good evening, one and all. So we'll start the session with Dr. Gurudat's talk on bile apparatus. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram and Sri Priya, and also Dr. Suresh Kumar. Now, whatever Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram said is totally wrong, especially about me and about him also. So everybody knows that whatever he's telling is not the right thing. He is one of the best teachers around in the country. So he just for the sake of making people laugh, so he keeps telling like that. So anyway, we will start with our my lecture on the anesthesia workstation. So Shilpa, can you just play this thing? So good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram for this opportunity, and also I would like to bring greetings from JSS Medical College Hospital, presently Mysore, presently where I'm working. So knowledge about the anesthesia workstation is very important for all the postgraduate students, and that is because many of the questions that are asked in the practicals is regarding the equipments will be regarding the anesthesia machine and then the workstation. So you can definitely score a lot of marks if you know more about the workstation. And many times the short notes are also given for theory regarding various parts of this workstation. The third thing why you should know about your workstation better is for the safety of the patient. Because it is said that it is the man behind the machine is more important than the machine itself. So if you know the machine you better, so you can be very safe to your patient. So let us know more about the anesthesia workstation. So when anesthesia was introduced by Sir William Thomas Green Martin, that was October 1846, October 16th. So this date is very important for all of us, October 16th. So because on that day, the Martin publicly demonstrated the effectiveness of ether as an anesthetic agent. And October 16th, even today, we celebrate as the World Anesthesia Day. And on that day, he used a simple glass flask for providing anesthesia. He did not use any sophisticated equipment. Here you can see Martin providing anesthesia to Gilbert Abbott, the patient. The vascular tumor is being removed by surgeons Warren and Beagle. So for a long time, almost nearly probably about 60, 70 years, only inhalation anesthetic agents were being used And the only equipment they were using either a Schimmel bush mask or their own handkerchiefs, because majority of the times the anesthesia was being used using the open drop method. So, but later in the early 1900s, especially 1912 to 1915, these gases, especially the oxygen and nitrous oxide, were introduced as compressed gases in cylinder form. So many times you'll be asked, one of the questions is, what is a compressed gas? So you should know that a compressed gas is the one which has got a pressure of more than 40 psi pounds per square inch at 70° Fahrenheit. And if it is a liquid gas like nitrous oxide, it should have a pressure of more than 40 psi at 100° Fahrenheit. So these are called as a compressed gases. So suppose if the pressure is less than 40 psi pounds per square inch, you don't call that as a compressed gas. So since oxygen and nitrous oxide and also cyclopropane were being provided in cylinders as compressed gases, there was a requirement of a metal framework wherein these cylinders could be mounted and the gases could be mixed and then provided to the patient as anesthetic agents. So this requirement of a metal framework and also proper mixing of these gases was provided by Sir Henry Edmund Gaskin Boyle. That was the first anesthesia machine introduced by him in 1970. Actually, the manufacturers of the first anesthesia machine was British Oxygen Company Limited. They were magnanimous to give the name of the anesthesia machine to Boyle himself. So for many years, this machine was called as Boyle anesthesia machine. And even today, some of the world surgeons, even though its workstation is there, they still call that as the Boyle machine. And since the introduction of anesthesia machine by Edmund Gaskin Boyle, a lot of changes have been made for this machine. And presently what we use is anesthesia workstation. So many times you'll be asked, because simultaneously the machine and then the workstation will be kept in for your practicals side by side, they are kept. And invariably, one of the questions that is commonly asked is, what is the difference between workstation and the machine? So anesthesia machine has got purely, it has got a pneumatic component, and whereas the workstation has got electrical and electronic components, and also it has got integrated ventilator and integrated monitors, and more than all these things, it has got the integration of many of the safety features. These safety features have been introduced into these anesthesia workstation mainly to prevent hypoxic mixture being delivered to the patient. There used to be, with the older anesthesia machines, there used to be many mishaps of providing hypoxic mixture to the patient, and there have been many even deaths also have occurred because of the problem with these older machines. Now it is almost said that almost 99% of the times you will not be able to provide any kind of hypoxic mixture to the patient using this anesthesia workstation. They are absolutely very safe. So all over the world, two giant companies manufacture these workstations. One of these is the GE company, and the other is the Draeger company. So why we are supposed to know about these is that there are certain differences between the GE workstations and then the Draeger workstations. Many times when whatever you are using in your operation theaters, maybe you're using only the Draeger machines or you may be using the GE machines. So, but when you go to the particular center, there for exam purpose, so there they may have either a Draeger or a GE machine. So better to know the differences between both these the workstations. So in my lecture, I'll be talking about the differences between the GE workstation as well as the Draeger workstation. So let us discuss about the pneumatic component of the anesthesia workstation, because a lot of questions will be asked regarding the pneumatic component of the workstation. So this pneumatic component of the workstation is basically divided or classified based on the pressures in these parts of the anesthesia workstation. So it is classified as the high pressure system, the intermediate pressure system, and then the low pressure system. The high pressure system mainly from the cylinder up to the pressure regulators, and from the pressure regulators where the pressures of the cylinders are reduced and also the pipeline is connected there. So till the flow control valves, we have the intermediate pressure system, and from the flow control valves to the common gas outlet, what we have is the low pressure system. Now, what are the pressures in each of these systems? So the high pressure system, mainly the cylinder pressures. Oxygen has got a fully loaded oxygen cylinder. Usually will have a 2000 psig of the pressure, pounds per square inch gauge pressure. Nitrous oxide is a liquid gas, so it will have about 750 psig. So whereas the intermediate pressure system, I told you the pipeline supply in the modern workstations is in the intermediate pressure system. So here the pressures are the intermediate pressure system usually have a pipeline pressure of 50 to 60 psig, and the cylinder pressures are reduced by the pressure regulators to 45 psig. So one of the common questions that is asked is why the pipeline pressures will be higher than the cylinders reduced pressures of the cylinders. So this is again a safety features that is adopted in the workstations. This is mainly because suppose as soon as you come to the OT, you'll open the cylinders because cylinders are basically used as backup source of oxygen. So you'll open the cylinder, check the cylinder pressure, and then you'll close the cylinder because you want to keep it for backup whenever there is exhaustion of the pipeline gas source of oxygen. So suppose you forget to close the cylinders after opening it, and also you have connected the workstation to the pipeline. So what will happen is when you start using, since this cylinder will not be used up by the workstation because the pipeline pressure being high, the pipeline source of oxygen is only used by the workstation, preferentially used by the workstation. So that's how it's a safety feature, and the cylinders will be for backup. Once suddenly, if there is a pipeline pressures are exhausted, then definitely you can use cylinders for backup source of oxygen. But ideally speaking, you should not keep the cylinders open all the time because once the pipeline pressures are exhausted, pipeline source of oxygen is exhausted. Now the workstation will start using the cylinders, and alarms will start off only when oxygen present in the cylinders are also exhausted. So then you will not have any backup of oxygen source. So ideally you should close the cylinders. But this particular question regarding the pipeline pressure being higher than the cylinder is a safety feature that you should always talk about. Because in the older anesthesia machines, the pipelines are also used to be connected to these yoke assembly, and there was not a separate inlets for pipeline gas source. So that's how, if you open the cylinder and as well as you are using the pipelines, so usually the cylinder pressure being higher than the pipeline, the cylinders used to get exhausted first because, the workstation used to use the cylinder gases first preferentially, and then only it used to use the pipeline gases. So that problem has been negated by connecting, by presenting separate inlets for pipeline connections in the workstation, and the pipeline connections are in the intermediate pressure system. So the low pressure system, usually at the common gas outlet, you have a pressure of 5 to 8 psig. So these pressures usually will be asked for you in the high pressure system, what is the pressure, intermediate pressure system, what is the pressure, and low pressure system, what is the pressure. Now coming to we'll discuss about each of these pressure systems. So let us discuss about the high pressure system. Mainly consists of the cylinders, the yoke assembly, and the pressure gauges, and then the pressure regulators. Let us discuss about the cylinders because a lot of questions will be asked for you in the exam regarding the cylinders. So one thing they'll usually ask about the various parts of the cylinders. So usually the parts of the cylinder, usually it has got a body, it has got a shoulder, it has got a neck, and separately a valve is connected into the cylinder. So the cylinder valve is a separate entity when compared to the cylinder. This you should always know about. And what is one of the most important safety features in the manufacture of the cylinder is it is manufactured as seamless. Seamless means there is no joints, because if there is a joint, it is a weak area, and because the high pressure gases are there, so it may give way at that particular joint level. So that's the reason why there are absolutely no joints. That's why it is called as seamless. So then another question that is asked is, what is the material with which these cylinders are made of? So initially when cylinders were introduced, they were made of hand-forged steel. So the problem with the hand-forged steel was its tensile strength was very low. So that's why it had to be made with lot of thickness of the body of the cylinder had to be made to not to yield for these high pressure gases inside. So because of that, it used to weigh heavy. And other thing was the lumen was also was reduced because of the increased thickness of the walls of these cylinders. Now presently these modern cylinders are made of molybdenum steel. So the advantage of molybdenum steel is because this will have a high tensile strength, and because of that, the walls could be thinned out, and so that's the reason why it's made lightweight, and also the lumen has got higher lumen when compared to hand-forged steel, so it can hold about 20% more gas. We also have aluminum cylinders also. These aluminum cylinders are mainly used in MRI suits. So let us discuss about the cylinders, the safety features of the cylinders. And before that, let us know about the markings on the cylinders, because many times you'll be asked about these markings. In olden days, one of the short notes was the markings on the cylinder used to be asked. So there are usually many markings are there on the body of the cylinder. One of the important marking is the service pressure. What is service pressure? Service pressure is the maximum pressure with which the gases are filled inside the cylinder for supply to the user. And you can see here it is 2050. And also it is written 3AA. 3AA means it is the steel. 3AL means it is the aluminum. So that is the alloy with which it is also made of. And also you can see here chrome molybdenum steel, that is also your CRMO. So that is molybdenum steel that is used. The other thing that is etched is usually the cylinders are tested with the hydraulic test, and the amount of expansion that is usually tested, there should be a minimal expansion. Here you can see the elastic expansion is 17.5 cc when they are subject to a pressure of 1.6 times the surface pressure. You can see here the pressure that is used is 3,360 psi. At this pressure, what is the amount of expansion? So there should be a minimal expansion that is usually less than 20 cc, that is about 17.5 cc, that is also written. So the dates on which the cylinders are tested also, many times it can be there on the cylinder itself engraved, but many times, a separate disc will be there, either a plastic disc or a metallic disc that is in between the cylinder valve and then the body of the cylinder. Usually, many times you would not have observed this metal disc. Usually, they'll ask you in the exam, what is this disc for? And this disc, on this disc, the date on which the cylinders, the tensile strength of the cylinders are tested is usually written on this. So markings, as I said, these are AL for steel and then 3AA for steel and ALM for aluminum. And also very important thing about one of the markings is the tear weight of the cylinder is also marked on the cylinder body. Tear weight means the weight of the empty cylinder. This is mainly, we have to know the empty cylinder weight. So that, you have to know how much of nitrous oxide, because, oxygen, there is no problem. Oxygen is a gas because its critical temperature is very low, -118. It remains as a gas at room temperature of 20 degrees. So the pressure gauge itself will know that what is the content of the cylinder, whether it is full or not. Whereas nitrous oxide, because it is a liquid gas, so you have to know the tear weight. So you can measure the total weight of the cylinder with the nitrous oxide inside, and if you minus the tare weight or empty weight of the cylinder, you get what is the actual weight of the liquid nitrous oxide. That's why this tare weight is also important for us to know about. So these cylinders are usually, they're are given the alphabetical numbers. So like A to M. So D and E cylinders are the ones which are mounted onto the cylinders because onto the workstations, because the D and E cylinders have got the pin index, because the pin index is very important to mount a particular cylinder onto the yoke of the workstation. So, whereas the larger cylinder G, H, and M are the bulk cylinders, especially the H cylinders are the bulk cylinders, which are usually kept in the manifold room. The F cylinders are the ones which are usually used for transportation. So here the tare weight I was talking to you about, the tare weight of E-type cylinder is roughly about 5 kgs. This I'll be discussing later regarding this also. When you want to calculate the amount of nitrous oxide that is available for us to use, tare weight is very important. So color coding of the cylinder is another very important safety feature that was introduced in 1949, that is international color coding. So that is still being used in India. So an international color coding for oxygen is the black body with the white shoulders. Nitrous oxide, it is both the body and then the shoulders are French blue. Carbon dioxide is gray and helium is brown. Cyclopropane is orange. Entonox is blue body with blue and white shoulders. So in 2010, a new international color coding has been introduced. Of course, in India, we have not adopted it, but sometimes in the examination, you may be asked. So here, medical grade cylinders, all the bodies of the medical grade cylinders are painted white, and you can recognize the particular gas that is present inside the cylinder based on the shoulders. So you can see here, oxygen is white and white, and nitrous oxide is white body with blue shoulders. So, and air is white body and black and white shoulders, and carbon dioxide is white body and gray shoulders. So that's how you can recognize the new international color coding. Plus, a capital N is always written on the shoulders so that it represents the new international color coding. So better to know about this new international color coding, though it has not been introduced in India yet. Coming to the cylinder valves, a lot of safety features have been adopted in the cylinder valves. So cylinder valves has got basically two surfaces. One surface that is facing the machine that you should always identify in the exam also. Usually it consists of pins for the pin index safety system and also a nipple for the port for entry of, so there is a port for the connection to the nipple on the yoke assembly for entry of gases to the anesthesia workstation. The opposite surface is usually contains a conical depression where the retention screw, tip of the retention screw is held there. And just below that, you can also, some of the cylinders, not in Indian cylinders, you can have the pressure relief devices. So these two surfaces are very important for us to know about, because you should not connect this side of this, that is these, cylinder with the surface of the conical depression surface towards the anesthesia workstation. So this, the surface containing the pin index holes only should be connected towards the workstation. So let us see what are the safety features that are adopted in the cylinder valves. And this is a cross section of the cylinder valve. So it's again important to know these cylinder valves that are used, E-type cylinder valves and D-type cylinder valves, they are called as the direct type of valves because they have a packing here. You can see the packing and the packing nut is there. So, and a spindle is there or the stem is there. So once you, rotate this spindle or the stem in an anti-clockwise rotation, so the packing will start getting released, or the packing will start releasing the opening of the port, and the gases will start coming out. So this is very important for us to know that how to open the the cylinder itself. So you have to only rotate the spindle and not the gland nut. So this is the packing nut or the gland nut. This is mainly to see that the packing is properly placed inside. And you can see the opposite side, you have the safety relief device and the conical depression. So, and below the port, we have the holes for pin index safety system. So coming to the pin index safety system, another common question that is asked also in theory, you are asked about the pin index safety system for 10 marks many times. So this was introduced in 1952 by Philip Woodbridge. So till 1952, we had only the color coding that was used in 1949. So cylinders used to be identified with only the colors. But sometimes, you know, if the person who did not know about the color coding, suppose if he could connect a wrong cylinder to the particular yoke and then can provide hypoxic gases to the patient. So in order to prevent that, the pin index safety system was introduced in 1952 by Philip Woodbridge. So this pin index safety system is, you know, the holes are made just below the port of the cylinder. So exactly from the center of the port at a radius of curvature of 9/16 of an inch, usually the holes are made from, you know, from right to left. The holes are made like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So usually the hole 1 will overlap on hole 2 and hole 2 will overlap on hole 3. So whereas hole 3 and 4 will not overlap on each other, hole 4 and 5 will overlap, 5 will overlap on 6. Because the hole number 7 is usually will be overlapping the hole number 3 and 4. So again, you will be asked about the the diameter of these holes. Also, other than the radius of curvature of 9/16 of an inch, each of the holes is the diameter is about 4.75 millimeter, because the pins have to go into these holes. So the diameter of the pins is 4 millimeters. Diameter of the holes is 4.75 millimeters. The depth of these holes is 6 millimeters. That means the length of the pins are also 6 millimeters. So these few of the measurements you should always know. And also you should know the pin index of each of these gases. So the pin index of oxygen is 2.5. The nitrous oxide is 3.5. Air is 1.5. Here, you know, the common thing is the fifth one. The fifth hole is common for oxygen, nitrous oxide, and air. It's only the first hole that is important. So air you can remember as air 1 and oxygen 2 and nitrous oxide as 3. And carbon dioxide, the pin index numbers is 1.6. And NOx, I told you, it is a single hole. It is a hole that is 7 that overlaps the hole number 3 and hole number 4. So coming to the other safety feature that is adopted in the cylinders is, suppose, you know, if the cylinders are accidentally kept in the sun, if they start getting heated up, what will happen is the gas inside tries to expand, because we know that based on Charles' law, the temperature and volume are directly proportional to each other. But here the tensile strength of the cylinder will not allow to increase the volume inside. So because we know that if the volume is kept constant, temperature and pressures are directly proportional to each other based on the Gale-Sykes law. So the pressure starts increasing. So at a particular pressure, the cylinders may break, and even they may break so violently that they may even produce collateral damage. So in order to prevent this particular problem to occur, so there are safety relief devices have been provided. These safety relief devices are usually present just below the conical depression. So the various devices are there, like, you know, we have Fusible Plug, the Ruptured Disc, and or frangible disc, or a combination of both Fusible Plug and the Ruptured Disc, or it can be a simple pressure relief valve also can be there. So let us discuss about these each one. The Fusible Plug. So the Fusible Plug is commonly asked again because, you know, it is the Fusible Plug has got a metal inside, or an alloy actually. This alloy is called as the Woods alloy or the Woods metal. So it is made of cadmium, bismuth, lead, and tin. So the specialty about this is it melts at 150 to 170 degree Fahrenheit. Because the cylinders are accidentally kept in sun, the temperature starts increasing. Once the temperature reaches this particular temperature, the alloy starts melting, and the gases are vented out. So the definitely problem of breaking of the cylinders can be prevented. So the other thing I said is the ruptured disc. So the ruptured disc is usually it is made of a copper disc is there. So at a particular pressure, as the pressure starts increasing, the disc will rupture and it vents out the gases. The third type I told you, it is a pressure relief valve. That is majority of our the cookers that we use in our kitchen usually have these kind of pressure relief devices. So here the disc is there, and it is also has connected to a spring, and spring always keeps this pressure relief device closed. Suppose if the pressure inside the cylinder starts increasing, so the disc will push the spring to the other side, and the gases are vented out through the discharge channels. Again, once the pressure decreases, again the disc will come back to its original position and then closes the cylinder. So that once you are using the pressure relief devices like these, definitely you can reuse the cylinder. Whereas if you are using the ruptured disc is there, or the fusible plugs are there, then these cylinders have to be sent back to the company for replacement of the safety devices. So there is an advantage with the pressure relief device, a simple pressure relief device that is there with many of the cylinders. But usually many times these pressure relief devices, simple pressure relief devices like that are used in our kitchen cookers, are usually not used for cylinders, because they may not work all the time. So if they don't work all the time, so there can be explosion can occur. That's what we have seen in some of the papers we read about the cookers exploding in the kitchen. So mainly either a combination of fusible plug and ruptured disc, or individually they are used. So whereas in Indian cylinders, if you try to search for this underneath the the conical depression, you don't find this because we don't have this. So that means, don't we have any kind of safety measure? We do have safety measure, because once the cylinder valve is screwed into the body of the cylinder, in between the cylinder valve and inside of the body of the cylinder, the Woods alloy has been incorporated, so that this Woods alloy will melt at a higher temperature and will give vent to the gases. Another thing commonly asked for you in the exam is, what do you mean by cracking of the cylinder? So when before actually connecting the cylinder onto the workstation, what you have to do is you have to open the cylinder, and then suppose during transportation, if there are some dust particles are there inside the port, so they should not be they should not enter the main workstation, because one problem is they are inflammable and they can catch fire. The other thing is they may block the narrow channels of the pipings of the workstation. So in order to prevent that, you first open the cylinder outside and then only close it, and then again mount the cylinder onto the workstation. And this is called as cracking the cylinder. And many times you are asked in the exam to do this, to open the cylinder. So you would never have opened, because majority of the times what I have found is all these cylinders are opened by the technician and also mounted to the machine by the technicians. So it is always better about how to open the cylinder. What as examiners, what we want to observe is how you are opening. Actually, when you are opening or cracking of the cylinder you're doing, so you have to lean the cylinder away from the body and then the head, because if your head is above the cylinder and you're opening, suddenly, because the cylinder valve is a separate entity compared to the cylinder, and suppose if it is loose and it comes out, and it can hit your face, and it can produce a damage to your head and neck. That's how, in the exam, you will be watched how we are going to open the cylinder. You slant it and then open and then crack the cylinder. The other thing you'll be asked is to mount the cylinder onto the machine, because that is also important. So for mounting the cylinder onto the machine, what you have to do is you have to, lift the cylinder with your foot and then, balance the cylinder with your foot and only mount it to the yoke assembly. So this is another very important thing which many of the students would not have been done. So it is better you practice this, because you may be asked how you are going to mount the cylinder onto the yoke assembly. So the other thing they'll ask you is, once you connect the cylinder onto the workstation, how you are going to open the cylinder. So because it is very important to open the cylinder very slowly, because you have to open the cylinder with the key, the cylinder key. So the spindle has to be rotated at least anti-clockwise about 3.5 rotations. So then only the port will be completely opened. But when you are opening, you open it very slowly, because if you open it rapidly, the problem is, you see, this is the cylinder and in the yoke assembly, and the gases have to travel to the pressure regulator through a narrow channel. So what will happen is, suddenly if you open it rapidly, before the pressure regulator could reduce the pressure, so the gases get compressed in this narrow channel, and because sudden compression releases a lot of heat. And because there is no time for this heat to be dissipated to the environment, and this is called as an adiabatic process, wherein the energy is neither lost or gained. So if there is any dust particles here, so it will catch fire and an explosion can occur. So that is one thing. They'll ask you about the adiabatic process also, and how you are going to open the cylinders. So you should open it very closely, very slowly. 3.5 rotations are required for these direct type of cylinders to be completely, the port to be completely open. So, these cylinders are tested every 5 to 10 years for their tensile strength. So usually one of the cylinder of that particular batch is tested, and all the cylinders need not be tested, and the date on which the testing has been done is usually etched on the plastic ring or the metal ring that is placed just the junction of the cylinder valve and then the body of the cylinder. Usually the common testing that are done is the hydraulic testing, the flattening test, impact test, and the bend test. Most commonly done is the hydraulic testing and the expansile, the pressure at which, how much of expansion at service more than 1.6 times service pressure, what is the amount of expansion is tested. So the hydraulic testing is the most common test that is done. So filling of the cylinders again can be asked for you. So usually the gases like oxygen are usually filled with their service pressures of 2000 psig. So whereas the liquid gases, especially the nitrous oxide, is filled based on the filling density. So what is filling density, or otherwise called as a filling ratio? So filling density or filling ratio is nothing but the ratio between the weight of the liquid nitrous oxide divided by the weight of water. Now, usually the E-type cylinder, the capacity of the E-type cylinder is 5 liters. So because this density of water is 1, so 5 liter means the weight also is 5 kgs. So the filling density is usually in the tropical country like India, it is 0.68. In temperate climates, it is 0.7. So this filling density you should always know. This is asked for you. So once you know the filling density, you can know how much of nitrous oxide can be filled in the cylinders, in the E-type cylinders, because the filling density being 0.68 and capacity is 5 kgs, that is the weight of water. So just multiply 5 multiplied by 0.68, you get 3.4 kgs. So if the cylinder, when nitrous oxide cylinder, when it is completely filled, is supplied to you, it should weigh 3.4 kgs. So because you know the tare weight of the cylinder, so we weigh the cylinder with nitrous oxide, you minus the tear weight. So you get what are the weight of the nitrous oxide liquid that is supplied. So that's how you should know how it is filled. It is filled by filling density, whereas the gases like oxygen and air are with the service pressure of 2000 psi. And another thing they'll ask you is, when you fill that with the filling density, how much of the cylinder is filled? It's usually filled to 90 to 95% of the capacity of the cylinder is filled with the nitrous oxide, because some amount of the space is required for it to vaporize. So it is not, don't think that the full the cylinder inside is filled to the brim. So some amount of space is kept. So 90 to 95% of the cylinder is filled with nitrous oxide or carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is also liquid gas. So in a nutshell, the safety features of cylinders made of molybdenum steel, high tensile strength, color coding, seamless body, safety relief valve, and then the pin index safety system. So coming to the hanger yoke assembly, another very important part of the the anesthesia workstation. So this mainly the hanger yoke assembly consists of the body, the retaining the screw, then the pins for pin index safety system, the port for the nipple for the port of the cylinder to be connected, and then the Bodak seal. So where this is a washer. So some of the functions of the hanger yoke assembly sometimes will be asked. Most important function is it supports and orients the cylinder onto the anesthesia workstation. So the second thing is it maintains a leak-proof connection between the cylinder and machine because of the presence of Bodak seal. And other thing is it always maintains a unidirectional flow of gases. The gases will only flow towards the machine, and it will not come out of the machine. So in the olden days, this hanger yoke assembly used to be on the sides of the anesthesia machines, but now presently the hanger yoke assemblies have been shifted to the back of the workstations just below the pipeline inlets. I told you that the leak-proof connection between the cylinder and then the yoke assembly is made because of the presence of the Bodak seal. So this also will be asked for you, the Bodak seal. So it is made of the the neoprene rubber, and also it has got a metal aluminum ring on the periphery. So this neoprene rubber is very strong. So that's the reason the Bodak seal has got a long life. So one thing you should always remember is that you should always use one Bodak seal for each of the cylinder to be connected onto the yoke assembly. You should not connect more than one, because if you try to use more than one Bodak seal, you may negate the pin index safety system. So I told you that there will be a unidirectional flow of gases through the yoke assembly. Here, I'm showing you two yoke assemblies. This one yoke assembly, this another yoke assembly. So here, here one yoke assembly, the cylinder has been connected. The other yoke assembly, no cylinder has been connected. Once you open the cylinder, there is a check valve is there. So the gases will push the check valve, and the the gases will be able to start flowing towards the anesthesia machine. So if the gases are trying to flow out of the anesthesia machine through the other yoke assembly, your check valve will not allow. So, but many times what will happen is, so yes, of course, this check valve will prevent the leaking of the gases through the other yoke assembly, and also it will prevent the transfilling of an empty cylinder. Suppose if there is an empty cylinder here, so that the transfilling of that empty cylinder from this cylinder is also prevented by the presence of the check valve. So one thing you should always remember that these check valves may not be functioning all the time properly. That's why with all the anesthesia workstations or the machines, so a yoke plug has been provided. It will be hanging by the side, and this yoke plug is used to plug the yoke assembly whenever it is not being used. So you can see here this yoke plug, which is chained to the yoke assembly, so that you should always observe this. So it will be hanging by the side of the anesthesia, by the side of the yoke assembly. So these are the yoke plugs. You can see these yoke plugs have been used to plug the yoke assembly. So the another thing you should always remember in the older machines, sometimes because the older machines are also kept there. So the pipeline system is usually attached to the yoke assembly itself, because in the older machines, we did not have separate pipeline inlets for the pipeline system. So the pipelines used to be attached through a the adapter or a connector, which is called as the the cylinder or the yoke block. Because I told you that these yoke blocks resemble the cylinder valves. So that's how, sometimes you'll be asked, especially about what is this particular thing that is present at the end of the central pipelines for the older machines. So they are called as the yoke blocks. So you can see these are the yoke blocks. You can see here the yoke blocks also have got the Pneumatic holes. So that you cannot connect a particularly a nitrous oxide pipeline onto the oxygen yoke and vice versa. So that's the safety feature that is adopted there. And another safety feature, again, you can see here the holes are made on either side of the port here. Now, because why it's very important to know about this is, suppose the cylinders you cannot invert and connect, blocks you can definitely invert and connect onto the yoke assembly. So that way, suppose you can definitely negate the Pneumatic safety system if the holes are there only on one side of this yoke block. That's why the holes are made on either side of the port of the yoke block. So this is again is an exam question. You will be asked about why there are two Pneumatic holes on the yoke block. Of course, we do have separate inlets for pipeline connections in our modern workstations. So again, there is a safety feature that is adopted for these pipeline connections also, so that you cannot connect a wrong gas pipeline onto the inlet of a particular gas on the anesthesia workstations. So the safety feature that is adopted is called as a diameter index safety system. So here, the pipeline side, we have the nut and stem, and on the inlet on the machine side, we have the body. So the diameters of the nut and the stem have to be aligned with the body. So then only you can connect a particular pipeline onto the inlet of the anesthesia workstation. So in the diameter index safety system, or otherwise called as the disc, so both the nut and then the stem are diameter indexed. Whereas in another kind of a safety system that is called as the Nist Connectors, that is the non-interchangeable screw threads. So where only the stem is the diameter indexed and not the nuts. Nuts are usually of the same size. So these Nist connectors are used by in the British companies which manufacture the workstations, whereas the American companies which manufacture, they use the diameter index safety system. Even, there will be at the inlet also, there prevents which maintains the gases to flow only towards the machine and also prevents the leak. So the other thing is the pipelines that are usually connected on the wall side also using diameter index safety systems, but these are actually not called as the diameter index safety system. They are called as the Schrader valves or the quick couplers, because you can quickly couple or decouple at the wall outlets. And these pipelines are also color coded. So that is another safety feature adopted at the wall outlets. Now, I told you these, the pressure gauges are also present over the yoke assembly in the older machines. Just they are connected to the yoke assembly itself. But in the modern workstations, these pressure gauges are present just below the flow control knobs. And another very important thing here, a safety feature adopted in the modern workstations regarding the pressure gauges, is that in the older machines, the pressure gauges were present only for the cylinders. Now the pressure gauges are also there for the pipeline system also. So the symbol of cylinders are there for the cylinders, and the symbol of pipelines are there for the pressure gauges of the pipeline system, so that you can continuously know what is the pressure that is there in the pipeline system also. Whereas in the older machines, we were not able to know what is the pipeline pressure. So the other important thing is these pressure gauges are color coded. So here you can see oxygen is white and nitrous oxide is French blue, and air is both the black and white. So these pressure gauges are called as the Bowden's pressure gauge. Usually the Bowden's pressure gauge will have a metal tube, a hollow metal tube made of copper. The tip of the metal tube is closed and it is connected through a clockwork mechanism to an indicator, which will be moving on. The gauge is also there. So what happens is, once you open the cylinders, so the gases will start moving through the hollow tube, the C-shaped hollow tube, and because of the pressure of the gases, the hollow tube starts straightening, and it moves the indicator over the gauge, and the the pressure that will be shown here. So another important safety features regarding this Bowden's pressure gauges are, towards the machine side, they are covered by a very hard glass, which usually is non-breakable glass. On the back side is a thin tin sheet is attached. Suppose if there is a break of these hollow tubes, so the gases will not come out through the front of the machine, only they are released on the back of these pressure gauges. So that again, injury to the patient and also to the anesthetist and the surgeons is prevented if there is an accidental break of these pressure gauges. So in the older machines, there were no pressure gauges for nitrous oxide. There were only pressure gauges for the oxygen. So the basic thing during those days, they thought that because the nitrous oxide is a liquid gas, and whatever that is the pressure that is shown in the pressure gauge is the vapor pressure, until the last drop of nitrous oxide is vaporized, the pressure gauge will not show any change in the pressures, because it will be continuously the vapor pressure that is being shown. That is why in the older machine, sometimes this kind of a machine can be kept, and you may be asked why there is no pressure gauge for nitrous oxide. So see, suppose if you are using oxygen, so the pressure gauge will directly show the contents of the oxygen. That is based on the formula, that is PV is equal to nRT, that is a universal gas law. Here R is a constant and T temperature is a constant. So that's why the PV is equal to N, that is N is the number, that is the content. So since the volume is also kept constant of the cylinder, the P directly represents the N, that is the pressure directly represents the contents of the oxygen cylinder. So suppose if it is full, it will be showing nearly 1900 to 1000 psig. So if it is half full, then it comes down to about 900 to 950 psig. When it is 1/4 full, the pressure drops down to 475 psig, and when it's empty, shows 0 psig. So just looking at the pressure gauge, what is the amount of the oxygen that is present, because the volume of a fully loaded oxygen cylinder, E-type cylinder, is about 660 liters. Half full, you can know it 330, 1/4 full, 165. That's how by looking at the pressure gauge, how much content of the oxygen that is present. Whereas with nitrous oxide, as I told you, because the critical, it's always is a liquid, and because the critical temperature of nitrous oxide is 36.5, it is much higher than the room temperature. So it always remains as the liquid gas. So till the last drop of nitrous oxide is evaporated, it will be showing the same pressure of 745 psig will be shown in the pressure gauge. So you will not know what are the contents based on the pressure gauge. So the pressure gauge, the indicator will start falling only when all the nitrous oxide has been evaporated, all the liquid is evaporated. So that why in newer machines, the nitrous oxide pressure gauge is also there, that once the indicator starts falling, we know that all the liquid nitrous oxide has turned into vapor, and then we require to have one more nitrous oxide cylinder. So how do we calculate the amount of gas in these cylinders? So calculation of oxygen in the E-type cylinder is usually based on the Boyle's law, because the Boyle's law says that the pressure and volume are inversely proportional to each other, provided the temperature is kept constant. So PV is a constant, or you can have this formula rewritten as P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2. So suppose the P1 V1 is a constant, P2 V2 is a constant. So P1 is the pressure, the gauge pressure once you open the cylinder. So it's fully loaded oxygen cylinder will have 2000 psig. The volume of E-type cylinder is 5 liters. So we know the P2 at which we will be using, that is atmospheric pressure of 15 psi will be using. If you want to know what is V2, can easily calculate 2000 multiplied by 5 divided by 15, it is 660 liters. So we know that the fully loaded oxygen cylinder, E-type cylinder, is about 660 liters. If you are using about 3 liters per minute, so you can use it for about 220 minutes. So whereas nitrous oxide, because I told you that it is a liquid gas, and the pressure gauge will not depict the contents. So in order to know how much of nitrous oxide is available, we have to use Avogadro's hypothesis. Avogadro's hypothesis says that 1 gram molecular weight of any gas or vapor occupies 22.4 liters at standard temperature and pressure. So the molecular weight expressed in grams is called as a gram molecular weight. So nitrous oxide molecular weight is 44 because nitrogen is 14, N2O, nitrogen is 14, 14 into 2 is 28, plus oxygen is 16. So this 44 is the gram molecular weight of nitrous oxide. So it will, 44 grams of nitrous oxide will yield about 22.4 liters of volume of vapor at 0 degree centigrade or 273 kelvins and at 760 millimeters of pressure, atmospheric pressure. These are the standard temperature and pressures. So if 44 grams is going to give us 22.4 liters. So I told you that when you know the actual weight of the nitrous oxide liquid, that is the total weight of the cylinder minus the tire weight, you get the actual weight of the cylinder. Usually the E-type cylinder is loaded with 3,300 grams or 3.3 kgs. So how much of this 3,300 grams will give us the volume of the vapor when we start using nitrous oxide cylinder? So 3,300 multiplied by 22.4 divided by 44. So you can get 1,680 liters at 0 degree centigrade or 273 kelvins. But we are using these cylinders at 20 degrees centigrade. So again, you have to use Charles' law, because Charles' law says that volume and temperature are directly proportional to each other at constant pressure. So V1 by T1 is a constant, V2 by T2 is a constant. So V1 by T1 is equal to V2 by T2. So we know V1 and we know T1. So we want to know V2 because we also know the T2. So that is V1, we know that we just calculated, it's 1680 liters. T1, it is 0 degree Kelvin, 0 degree centigrade or 273 kelvins. So V2 we want to calculate. So T2 is 273 plus 20 degrees. So 293 kelvins. So if you calculate, you get about 1,800 liters. That means a fully loaded nitrous oxide cylinder, when it is applied and you connect onto your anesthesia workstation, you can have about 1,800 liters of nitrous oxide. So suppose if you are using about 3 liters per minute, you can definitely use it for nearly about 10 hours. But once the indicator starts falling, still it contains about 250 liters. So that you should always know, because here you will be applying the Boyle's law. So coming to the, I told you the pressure gauges. Again, they are just below in the modern workstations, just below the flow control knobs. They are color coded, and also the separate pressure gauges are there for the pipeline system also, which is again a safety feature that is adopted. So in many of the modern workstations, there are no actual pressure gauges are there. They are digital. The pressure is usually through the pressure sensors that are there, electronic sensors, that they'll measure the pressure And usually on the monitors, you can see the digital value of these pressures, the pipeline pressures, as well as the cylinder pressures directly. So there are actually no pressure gauges will be there. So the pressure sensors and directly the digital display of these pressures are there in modern workstations. So till now we have discussed about the yoke assembly and then the cylinders. So the next we are going to discuss about the pressure regulator, the pressure regulators, and the remaining parts of the workstations. I'll be discussing in my next week.
Thank you, sir. That was a very informative lecture as usual, and I'm very sure all the PGs have immensely benefited out of it, and they're all eagerly waiting for the next session next week. So not only the PGs who have been online today, but because these are available, as Sir had mentioned that these YouTube videos are going to be available. It is for everyone, not only those who are now, but also for all the future generations to come. They're going to immensely benefit out of the lectures. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now moving on to the session 2. In the session 2, we have 2 talks. The first one is on phrenic nerve sparing superior tongue probe. So we are all fond of upper limb blocks, and Interscaling Block, we know that it provides excellent analgesia for shoulder surgeries. It has become an indispensable part of upper limb surgeries. So, but one of the most important problem with Interscaling Block is phrenic nerve palsy, and we know that the incidence is 100%. Now, ultrasound has revolutionized the practice of regional anesthesia. Yes, we have been very successful in increasing the success rate of the block, but has this technology helped us improve the block by decreasing the complication rate, especially the phrenic nerve palsy? This is what Dr. Anup is going to tell us. Over to you, Dr. Anup.
Thank you, madam. My slides visible?
Visible, no?
Okay, thank you, sir. Good evening, one and all. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, sir, and all the office bearers of the ISA Pudukkottai branch for giving me this opportunity. And a special thanks to Gurudat, sir, for suggesting my name and having faith in me. And Shri Priya ma'am, thank you for the introduction. Today, I'll be talking about the superior trunk block, a phrenic nerve sparing alternative for shoulder and lateral to two-third clavicle surgeries. I bring greetings from my parent institute, that is JSS Medical College and Hospital, Mysore. I would like to start my presentation with this quote: "A knowledge of anatomy is only a dead weight if we do not know how to apply the knowledge with successful skill." This basically tells we should have both knowledge and skill to be successful, especially in regional anesthesia. To understand regional anesthesia better or to be successful in our blocks, we should know the nerve supply very accurately. Only then we'll be able to block those nerves and provide adequate anesthesia or analgesia as per the requirement. So today's topic is related to shoulder and clavicle. So I want to have a brief description of the nerve supply of the shoulder joint. So shoulder is supplied basically by the suprascapular nerve and the axillary nerve, which have the root values of C5 and C6. Now, what is the nerve supply to the clavicle? It is not as simple as that, because you have two things that has to be covered. One is what supplies the skin over the clavicle and what supplies the periosteum. The skin over the clavicle is supplied by the supraclavicular nerves, which are the branches of superficial cervical plexus. Whereas the periosteum, we don't have a particular nerve that is supplying the periosteum in the clavicle. What the literature say is the periosteum in the clavicle is supplied by the same nerves which supply the muscles that are attached to the clavicle. So in order to have good anesthesia of this region, we need to block the muscles that are surrounding the clavicle as well. That is why we go ahead with an interscalene block. Now I want to have your attention here because I'll be using few terminologies which sound alike. So you should not get confused with this. For example, superior trunk block, superficial cervical plexus, supraclavicular nerves, and suprascapular nerves. So whenever I use these terminologies, I want you to concentrate a bit more so that we don't get confused with anything. Now revisiting the brachial plexus. This is the most important thing about our presentation. We need to know about the brachial plexus to understand any of the blocks better. As we all know, brachial plexus is formed by 6 roots. It has 3 trunks. It has 6 divisions and 3 cords. Brachial plexus is formed by the ventral primary rami of C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. If we receive anything from T4, we call it as prefixed. And if we receive anything below T1, we call it as postfixed. So what happens here is the C5 and C6 root join to form the upper trunk, whereas the C7 continues as the middle trunk, whereas C8 and T1 join to form the lower trunk. Now these trunks divide into divisions, anterior divisions and the posterior divisions. Anterior divisions of the upper trunk and the middle trunk will form the lateral cord. The posterior divisions of all 3 trunks form the posterior cord, whereas the anterior division of the lower trunk forms the medial cord. And we know the nerves that are supplied that arise from these cords. But out of concern, what we are concerned now here is the upper trunk. One speciality about the upper trunk is the upper trunk gives 2 important nerves. One is the suprascapular nerve and the nerve to subclavius. As I mentioned earlier, one major supplier of the shoulder joint is the suprascapular nerve, and subclavius muscle is attached to the clavicle. So some of the nerve fibers will supply the periosteum. So I want you to remember this picture. So when we go into the sonographical pictures, I'll be able to explain it in a better way. So what is this superficial plexus? Superficial cervical plexus is formed by C2, C3, and C4 anterior rami, and it gives rise to 3 branches: greater auricular and lesser occipital, transverse cervical, and supraclavicular nerves. So these are the nerves which are the ones which supply the skin over the lateral 2/3 of the clavicle. So what do we already know? As Madam said, we already know how to block these areas, especially the shoulder and clavicle. It is through the interscalene block along with superficial cervical plexus block. Coming to the interscalene block is administered at the level of cricoid cartilage in the interscalene groove. The interscalene groove is formed by 2 muscles. One is the anterior scalene and the middle scalene. The anterior scalene lies just behind the lateral border of the sternocleidomastoid. So this is the groove where the trunks and the divisions start to arise. So at the level of cricoid cartilage, when we deposit a local anesthetic in the interscalene groove, we'll be able to achieve the interscalene block. So if we place a linear high frequency probe in this region, what we see is this. We have the scalenus medius muscle, the scalenus anterior muscle, and sandwiched between these 2 muscles are the roots C5, C6, and C7, which appear like traffic lights. And one important structure that we have to observe is the phrenic nerve, which lies over the anterior scalene muscle in close proximity with the roots C5, C6, and C7. Now, how do we approach the superficial cervical plexus? Superficial cervical plexus, we generally give it ultrasound guided as well as landmark guided. Landmark guided, we take this point between the mastoid and the transverse process of the C6 vertebra or the Cusignax tubercle. We draw a line, and at the midpoint of this line, we make a field block, a subcutaneous field block to block these nerves. We can also give this block using ultrasound. Now, this is the sternocleidomastoid muscle, and just underneath the sternocleidomastoid muscle lies the superficial cervical plexus. So, if we deposit 3 to 5 ml of local anesthetic just underneath this lateral border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, we'll be able to achieve a good blockage of superficial cervical plexus. Now, what are the risks of interscalene block? As Dr. Sripriya Madam just said, the problem with interscalene block is the phrenic nerve. See, in this dissected anatomy, this is the sternocleidomastoid that is bisected and reflected up. This is the anterior scalene muscle. This is the middle scalene muscle. And this is the interscalene groove, which contains the brachial plexus. So at the level of cricoid cartilage, if we deposit any amount of drug in this region, the phrenic nerve invariably gets involved. So whatever advantages a regional anesthesia technique is going to give over general anesthesia, especially in respiratory cripple, is offset by this involvement of phrenic nerve, and this will lead to hemidiaphragmatic paralysis. So researchers have attempted different things to spare this phrenic nerve. They have tried different doses of local anesthetics. They have used different volumes of local anesthetics, and they have approached the interscalene groove in different ways. But were they successful? As such, no. That is because of incomplete anesthesia, inadequate analgesia, and in spite of all this effort, the involvement of phrenic nerve still stays as high as 34 to 62%. So what are the different techniques they have tried? Some of them have tried injecting drug in the supraclavicular region so that axillary nerve and suprascapular nerve are involved in blocked. But at any volumes above 20 ml, even in the supraclavicular region, the phrenic nerve gets involved. This is one message that I want to give PGs, that involvement of the phrenic nerve is not only with the interscalene block, but even a higher volume of supraclavicular block can still have involvement of phrenic nerve. So what next? What are the characteristics of ideal block for a shoulder surgery? It should be as effective as interscalene block, providing surgical anesthesia. It should spare the diaphragm and hand, and it should have minimal adverse effects such as dyspnea and hoarseness, which we usually see with interscalene block. So that is where we come into this concept of superior trunk block. As I said before, superior trunk is formed by the roots C5 and C6. When they join, they form the superior trunk. If we observe closely here, this is the anterior scalene muscle, this is the middle scalene muscle, and this is the omohyoid muscle, and this is the brachial plexus. So at the level of cricoid cartilage, when we deposit a local anesthetic in this region, the phrenic nerve is very, very close. This anatomical difference we should understand to know how superior trunk blocks spares the phrenic nerve. So at this level, at the level of cricoid, when we inject local anesthetic, the phrenic nerve always gets involved. But if we move down closely, see at this junction where the upper trunk is formed, the phrenic nerve already has dipped more medially and is away from our block. So the theory is by depositing a low volume of drug in this region, we'll be safely avoiding the involvement of phrenic nerve. So this is a picture which we have taken from our institute. So this is the middle scalene muscle, anterior scalene muscle, and the roots C5, C6, C7 with the phrenic nerve here. If we move the probe slightly down or slightly distally, we get to see the formation of the superior trunk, or what we call it as the upper trunk. By this time, the phrenic nerve has already moved more medially. So by depositing local anesthetic in this region, we will be safely preventing involvement of the phrenic nerve. This is a video which I would like to play. Unable to play this video. This here is the C5 root and this is the C6 root. C6 root usually has two divisions, which we invariably get confused thinking that this might be C6 and this might be C7. That is one wrong thing that we always think about. But C6 can have two divisions. C7 is somewhere still down. Okay, so the next a study was conducted on the effect of the superior trunk block against the interscalene block, and this yielded a result, very contrasting result, telling that superior trunk block had involvement of phrenic nerve only in 4.8%, whereas that in the interscalene block had almost 71.4%. So this itself shows that superior trunk block is very effective in avoiding involvement of the phrenic nerve. Now we have to be aware of few things before going for the block. In this region, we commonly encounter two arteries. One is the suprascapular artery, another one is the transverse cervical artery. So when we place a probe, it is always better to put in the color flow and identify these vessels. It is present in few of the individuals, so we should not enter these vessels that can lead to drastic complications. So always I would advise you all to check with your color flow to see any vessels or apparent vessels that are close to the plexus. Next is we need to be aware of the nerves. What happens at the level of cricoid cartilage when we go ahead and give an interscalene block is we most of the time pierce the middle scalene muscle. But two important nerves can lie in the bulk of the muscle itself. One is the long thoracic nerve, another one is the dorsal scapular nerve, which we can identify here in the picture. So this is the middle scalene muscle, and these are the two nerves that are present in the bulk of the muscle. And this is C5 root and this is C6 root. So when we are going to give an interscalene block ultrasound guided, there is high probability that we poke through the muscle, and by this we can damage these important structures. Whereas with an upper trunk block, when you see here, the middle scalene muscle has moved more down and the trunk is formed way above up. So the needle when we pass is always superficial to the middle scalene muscle, and we can reach the superior trunk without causing any damage to the interscalene muscles or the nerves that are there in those muscles. Now, where do we deposit the local anesthetic? Do we deposit in the over the trunk or below the trunk? There are studies which tell that whether you deposit over or above, the effect is not so much different because it spreads invariably. But few studies state that if you deposit 5 ml above the trunk and 5 ml below the trunk, the onset of action is faster, nothing else. But just to get the faster onset of action, it is not prudent to poke around the trunk so much because this can cause injury to the nerves. Now, what are the pitfalls of interscalene block that are negated by superior trunk block? As described before, phrenic nerve involvement is avoided. And as I told you earlier, C6 might have two elements causing confusion. So during an interscalene block, it can cause confusion because of the two elements of the C6 root, and that most of the time we end up going in between those two elements. That is very dangerous. But when we use this upper trunk block, these two elements will again combine with the C5 to form a full trunk, that is the upper trunk. Then anatomical variations of C5 roots are also common, because sometimes the C5 root might not be visualized in the interscalene groove at all. It will be lying over the anterscalene muscle. But if we move the probe little down, then it invariably converges with C6 to form the upper trunk, which is a more prominent structure. Epinurium of C5 and C6 is poorly defined. So many times we'll not be able to identify the C5, C6 roots at all. But at the level of upper trunk, it would have gathered more of connective tissue, making it very prominent. And this block, we give it as a parafacial block, and intrafacial injections are avoided. Our experience with it, we have utilized this block for surgeries involving the lateral end of clavicle, shoulder manipulation for periarthritis shoulder, and arthroscopy surgeries for analgesic purposes. And we have found it to be very effective. What we use is injection bupivacaine 0.5%, 8 ml for the upper trunk and 3 ml for the supraclavicular block. Phrenic nerve sparing is confirmed by the diaphragmatic movement visualized and using the ultrasound probe. We actually had a dye injection done in our anatomy lab with the help of Dr. Shiv Prakash. See, this is the sternocleidomastoid muscle, this is the anterscalene muscle, and these are the brachial plexus. So any drug which is deposited in this region is quite away from the phrenic nerve. So the dye that has stained only the upper trunk but has not gone more medially. So this again proves that limited volume injection of drug in the region of upper trunk safely prevents involvement of the phrenic nerve. So I'd like to conclude telling superior trunk block is an effective alternative to interscalene block for shoulder and lateral and clavicle surgeries with significant phrenic nerve sparing ability, especially in patients with compromised pulmonary functions. I would like to conclude my talk telling there is no new block, it's only the old anatomy. So if we know the anatomy better, if we understand the anatomy better, we can come up with new blocks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Anup. That was a very crisp presentation, and you have brought out some very important points. One is the importance of the traffic light sign. You said, yes, it is not necessarily C5, C6, and C7. It is C5 and the two divisions of C6. The second is to observe the transverse cervical artery and the dorsal scapular artery before making any injections. Next is the presence of the long thoracic and the dorsal scapular nerve in the middle scalene, which can be damaged during in-plane approach from lateral to medial. And the most important thing you brought about was the anatomical variation of C5. Presently, I'm also doing a study on what is the anatomy in this region in around 50 volunteers. And this is one thing that that is very important, that sometimes C5 is not at all present in interscalene groove. It is as high as 30 to 40%. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, one thing that you could not do the video, I have a small video. I have managed to just, shall I just share my screen?
Yeah.
And this one. Okay, 1 minute. I'll just take the video in the screen. Are you able to see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Are you able? Okay, I'll go on slideshow. And this is a 30-second video. I'll play it twice or thrice so that everyone can pay attention to it. So this is just as Dr. Anup said, the probe is placed transverse on the neck at the level of the cricoid cartilage. So this is the C5 nerve root coming out of the C5 transverse process. Then here is the C6 transverse process and the C6 nerve root. As we move down, this is the C7 transverse process and the C7 nerve root. Here we can see that the C5 and C6, they become multifascicular and they're coming close to each other, just about to join to form the upper trunk. And here the C7 has become multifascicular, it is the middle trunk. I'll play this again. So this is the C5 nerve root, C5 transverse process. C6 has a very prominent anterior tubercle, horseshoe-shaped transverse process, C6 nerve root. The C7 transverse process does not have an anterior tubercle, and we can see the vertebral artery also coming out of the foramen transversarium. So this is the C7, and C5, C6 has joined to form the upper trunk. Now, the important point you brought about was as we go distal, the phrenic nerve actually separates off. I will again play certain specific points on this video to focus on the phrenic nerve. Okay, this is the C5 nerve root which has emerged out of the transverse process. And these small structure we see here is actually the phrenic nerve. That's how close we are at the interscalene groove, hardly 1 millimeter. And that is the reason that we have around 100% incidence of phrenic nerve palsy with this block. So if we move caudal, I'll play the video from here, and I would like you people to focus on these two small structures here and what is the distance from the C5 nerve root. So these are the two things that is moving medial. This is C5 nerve root. This is what it is. And here we can see this is a pulsatile structure that is ascending cervical artery, and this is the phrenic nerve. And here is the upper trunk. So this is the distance we have actually gained if we go towards the upper trunk. It is very close at the level of the root, and this distance must be around 1.2 to 1.5 centimeter. It is not fixed, it varies with the individuals. So next, another small thing I would like to say is the connective tissue covering. Now we have a lot of literature on the microanatomy. So connective tissue covering like the epineurium, the paraneurium, those things. Like if you see with the epineurium, so the epineurium is actually surrounding the upper trunk. And there's an epineurium around the middle trunk. There is yet another layer of connective tissue that is enclosing all these together. That is this layer, which is called the paraneurium. So one more thing we can pay attention to is when we are depositing the drug, if we can target it subepineurial, that is just beneath epineurium here, then that means we are going to contain the drug within the epineurium and within the trunk. So obviously the next question is, can we observe all this with ultrasound? Can we see the epineurium? Can we know the paraneurium? That is obviously the next question that will come up. So obviously we cannot see this connective tissue very clearly. With high-end machines, yeah, to a certain extent, but how do we differentiate? When we can hydrolocate, when we use small volumes of normal saline and hydrolocate it from the pattern of spread, we can obviously identify whether it is the epineurium or the paraneurium. Now here, this is the upper trunk. How do I say this? This is the prominent, this is C7 and it has only a posterior tubercle, no anterior tubercle. So what is emerging out is the middle trunk. This is C6 and this is C5 nerve root. They have nearly joined to form the upper trunk. So if I perform a subepineurial injection, what will be the spread in the upper trunk? This is how it looks. What we have injected here is around 3 ml of local anesthetic. So this is all the local anesthetic we can see that is within the upper trunk. There is absolutely no drug that has gone out. It's not outside. If it had been outside, that is within the paraneurium, we would have seen some drug here between that and the middle trunk. So there's a 3 ml in the middle trunk. How does it look? This is the middle trunk with 3 ml of local anesthetic. There's nothing that has gone out. So this is all contained into the epineurium, below the epineurium. So how does the spread occur when we inject this 3 ml? That we injected dye and saw. So with 3 ml of local anesthetic in the upper trunk, we can see that the dye has spread all along the upper trunk, and the upper trunk dividing into the anterior and posterior division also we are able to see. That is how well contained it is if we are targeting the subepineal space. And this is 3 ml of local dye that is in the middle trunk. You can see how well contained it is. It has not gone to the upper trunk. That means what I want to emphasize is, so if it is so well contained, then obviously the involvement of phrenic nerve will be less. And even if there's a diffusion of local anesthetic across the connective tissue membranes, the intensity of block will be less, because obviously we know we have used 2% liquid. What goes out will be 1% or less than that. And the intensity of blockade of phrenic nerve will be very less. I wanted to emphasize on the connective tissue covering. If we can pay more attention to that, we can know that. And the thing is, when we are planning for a subepidural injection, giving a higher volume may itself be dangerous because it can spread into the epidural space, and obviously it can block the C3, C4, C5, which itself will cause a phrenic nerve palsy. So yes, this is what I wanted to tell from my side. You have covered all the important things. I'm very happy for that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for adding few things. And
yeah,
I think,
because your video didn't play, I just had it, and
yeah, now that was because I opened that laser pointer. The video was not playing. Now I just checked.
Do you want to play it now?
Yeah, I'll just try.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I'll just stop sharing my. Yes. You can play your video.
Yeah.
Can you go full screen?
Yeah, one second. This is the C5 and this is the C6.
Yes.
And we can see the suprascapular nerve that is coming. The most lateral most bubble is the suprascapular nerve. So we have to inject before that nerve exists. Otherwise, we'll be losing the suprascapular nerve and will not be able to have effective anesthesia or analgesia to the shoulder. That is one point I wanted to add to that the lateral most bubble is the suprascapular, and we need to inject before that leaves the upper trunk.
Thank you, Dr. Anu. So as Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram has told, that we'll take all the other questions at the end of the session.
Sure.
The next presentation will move on to yours. So the next session is on preoperative investigations, what to order. This is always a matter of confusion for us, and around the 25 eminent anesthesiologists across India have come up with a solution for this question, which is always controversial. And Dr. Anandita is going to brief us on what we have. Over to you, Dr. Anandita.
Good evening. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your introduction. Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, sir, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present. And a special thanks to Gurudat sir, who has supported me, and Anup sir too. So my topic today is preoperative investigations, practice guidelines from Indian Society of Anesthesiologists, which was published in May 22. And before this, battery of investigations were being ordered for all patients, even normal patients, and there were no proper guidelines as to what investigations were needed. So why do we need pre-op investigations? It is definitely essential for planning, stratification, optimization, and management of patients undergoing surgical procedures, and also to improve patient outcomes. So why do we need evidence-based practice guidelines? No uniform perioperative guidelines are followed despite published guidelines from professional bodies due to socioeconomic, demographic, medico-legal considerations. Ordering battery of investigation, which often may not influence the perioperative management and the guidelines. So there are no available guidelines on the time frame of the validity of previous investigations, known as validity time for previous investigations. So the Indian Society of Anesthesiologists, they decided to formulate evidence-based practice guidelines for preoperative investigation. So guidelines are prepared to promote judicious ordering of preoperative investigations with focus on perioperative management strategies, aid in better patient outcomes considering geographic, demographic, socioeconomic, and medico-legal aspects. So investigations, always they need to be individualized in patients scheduled for emergency surgeries, specialized surgical interventions such as cardiothoracic, vascular, neurological, transplant surgeries, and patients with severe systemic diseases. So the investigations ordered depend upon the type and urgency of surgery, which was classified into elective, semi-elective, and emergency surgeries, patient's current physiological status, associated comorbidities, and the medications being used, the complexity of the surgery as categorized by National Institute of Clinical Excellence, based on invasiveness of surgery, minor, intermediate, and major or complex surgery. So separate guidelines are required to address pediatric patients, obstetric and bariatric population, as they have specific pathophysiological considerations. Hence, the practice guidelines from ISA on preoperative investigations are aimed at patients with ASA physical status 1 and 2 scheduled for elective surgery. So these guidelines should never be substituted for good clinical judgment. That is, history and clinical examination always comes first. And the attending anesthesiologist can review the reports rationally and may consider individualizing the decision on further investigations to proceed with management. So tests for viral markers like coronavirus disease, etc., are screening modalities and not considered for formulating the current guidelines. So what is the focus of guidelines? Provide recommendation for routine preoperative investigations in ASA physical status 1 and 2 patients scheduled for elective surgical procedures. Validity timeframes for previously performed investigations. There is a 5% probability that a healthy person's report falling outside this defined range, so which may lead to unnecessary delay, referral, and further evaluation, postponing the surgery. So detailed history and clinical evaluation always must precede the ordering of preoperative investigation. This was categorization of surgical procedures was done based on invasiveness and duration of surgery, which was into minor, intermediate, and major surgeries. So minor surgeries included superficial debridement, fibroadenoma excision, gynecological procedures like dilatation, curettage, K-wire insertion removal, and cataract surgeries, etc. Intermediate surgeries included open or laparoscopic hernia repair, cholecystectomies, appendicectomies, varicose vein stripping, fest-up surgeries, etc. Major surgeries included MRM, flap reconstruction surgeries, or thyroid surgeries with neck dissection, etc. So the main point is neurosurgery, transplant surgery, and cardiothoracic surgeries were not included. This is a table showing ASA guidelines, which was updated in 2014. I will only elaborate on ASA 1 and 2, since that is what is required to formulate these guidelines. So ASA 1 is normal healthy patient, like we all know, and adult examples include healthy non-smoking individual or patients with minimal alcohol use. Pediatric examples, kids with no acute or chronic disease and who come under normal BMI percentile for age. ASA 2 includes a patient with mild systemic disease. Adult examples, mild diseases without functional limitations, current smoker, social drinker, pregnancy, obesity of BMI more than 30 but less than 40. Pediatric examples, asymptomatic congenital cardiac diseases, well-controlled dysarrhythmias, asthma without exacerbation, well-controlled epilepsy, non-insulin dependent diabetes, abnormal BMI for the age, and mild moderate OSA, oncological state in remission, and autism with mild limitations. As we all know, normal pregnancy, well-controlled gestational hypertension, preeclampsia without severe features, and diet control gestational diabetes mellitus also come under ASA2. So what are the guidelines and recommendations? For complete blood count, ISA recommended that preoperative complete blood count testing is suggested for patients undergoing minor, intermediate, and major surgeries. So anemia being a global health issue with almost prevalence rate of 14% in ASA 1 and 2 patients, which can contribute to tachycardia, arrhythmias, increased rate of infection, heart failure in perioperative period at times, increased duration of hospital stay or rates of intensive care admission, blood transfusion, which may have its own negative impacts, is necessary. So both leukocytes and leukopenia can potentially contribute to adverse outcomes in the perioperative period. Also, platelet counts may have adverse implications for both central neuraxial and peripheral nerve blocks, and increased platelet counts can implicate on thrombotic mechanism. So the guidelines related to influence of various drugs from alternative systems of medicine, which may have effect on platelet count or functioning, may also need to be considered. So comparison with ASA guidelines, they state that routine hemoglobin or hematocrit is not indicated, but it is indicated in women of reproductive age group and in children. So clinical characteristics to consider as indications for hemoglobin or hematocrit include type and invasiveness of the procedure, patients with liver disease, extremes of age, history of anemia, bleeding, and other hematological disorders. Renal function tests. Recommendation 2A states that preoperative serum creatinine estimation is not suggested for patients undergoing minor surgeries, and 2B states that it is suggested for patients undergoing intermediate and major surgeries. So among the renal function tests, serum creatinine is more specific than blood urea, and even estimated glomerular filtration rate calculation is based on the serum creatinine value. So it is considered as a main parameter which changes the outcome. So hypoxemia, hemodynamic instability, direct organ handling techniques, and duration of the procedures are some of the factors which can contribute to acute kidney injury in the perioperative period, especially for intermediate and major surgeries. So what is the recommendation 3? Preoperative serum sodium potassium estimation is not suggested for patients undergoing minor, intermediate, and major surgeries. So alteration in this electrolytes, sodium and potassium, may be associated with medical or surgical disorders, drug intake, and have a potential effect on anesthetic management of the outcomes. So they have not specified here, but many patients whose blood pressure is well controlled with diuretics or ARBs, AAC inhibitors are classified under ASA physical status 2, which may have electrolyte imbalance. So wherein evaluation pre-op is necessary for elective surgeries also. Liver function test, recommendation 4A says that preoperative LFT is not suggested for patients undergoing minor and intermediate surgeries. And 4B recommendation says that it is suggested for patients undergoing major surgeries. So liver function test assess the synthetic and metabolic functions of the liver, and also low albumin levels have been shown to have independent predicted outcomes. Coagulation profile. Abnormalities in preoperative coagulation tests may influence the perioperative management, definitely. So when regional techniques are planned in patients, especially who are on anticoagulants, the practitioner is advised to refer to the latest guidelines on regional anesthesia and anticoagulants. So the guidelines related to the influence of various drugs from alternative systems of medicine, which may have effect on coagulation, must be considered. So what is recommendation 5? Preoperative coagulation profile is testing is not suggested for patients undergoing minor, intermediate, or major surgeries. Coming to blood glucose, recommendation 6 states that in non-diabetic patients, preoperative blood glucose estimation is not suggested when scheduled to undergo minor, intermediate, or major surgeries. Patients are considered as non-diabetic if during anesthetic evaluation, there is no history, finding, or previous investigation report suggestive of diabetes mellitus. So in such patients, role of preoperative blood glucose estimation on perioperative outcomes needs to be evaluated. But detection of a single increased blood glucose level during preoperative investigations in patients without any diabetes mellitus and its potential influence on major outcomes like cancelling the surgeries or infection at cited evidences were considered, and they were worried that the case might be postponed. So what are the ASA guidelines for serum chemistries and also coagulation profile? So before ordering pre-anesthesia serum chemistries, perioperative therapies, endocrine disorders, risk of renal and liver dysfunction, and use of certain medications must be considered. So the task force recognizes that the lab values may differ from normal individuals' values at extremes of age. So ordering such coagulation studies, you must consider the bleeding disorders, renal, liver dysfunctions, etc. of the patient. Coming to 12-lead ECG. Recommendation 7A says that in non-cardiac patients with preoperative 12-lead ECG testing is suggested at age 45 years and above, and only when scheduled to undergo minor and intermediate surgeries. 7B states 12-lead ECG is suggested for all the patients undergoing major surgery. So preoperative 12-lead ECG testing can detect pre-existent or ongoing myocardial ischemic changes, endocardial or pericardial pathologies, electrolyte disorders, and underlying comorbidities. So non-cardiac status of patient is reflected by absence of history, clinical findings, or reports suggestive of cardiovascular diseases. So the incidence of cardiovascular disease increases with age. So when patients are at patients at risk as per evidences by age present for incidental surgeries, cardiac events are more likely to be encountered in the perioperative period. So what are the ASA guidelines? Important clinical characteristics may include cardiocirculatory disease, respiratory disease, and type or invasiveness of surgery. So the task force recognizes that ECG abnormalities may be higher in older patients and patients with multiple cardiac risk factors. So this may be indicated for patients with known cardiovascular risk factors or risk factors identified in course of pre-anesthesia evaluation, and age alone may not be an indicator for ECG. So chest X-ray recommendations 8A, preoperative chest X-ray testing is not suggested for patients undergoing minor surgery. 8B says that preoperative chest X-ray testing is suggested for patients aged 50 years and above undergoing intermediate and major surgeries. So preoperative chest X-ray findings influence the perioperative period, management definitely, but also the radiation hazards must be considered. So some of the radiographic changes may not be of relevance because they might be of an older pathology like tuberculosis, obstructive and restrictive lung disease, they say. So they reveal certain cardiovascular and pulmonary changes and which are attributable to smoking, pollution, or cardiac disorders, which definitely have cumulative effect by increasing age. Minor radiographic changes in younger individuals may not impact the perioperative management. So what does the ASA say? The clinical characteristics to consider ordering and chest X-ray include smoking, recent upper respiratory tract infection, COPD, and cardiac diseases. So the task force recognizes that chest radiographic abnormalities may be higher in such patients, but does not believe that extremes of age, smoking, stable COPD, stable cardiac disease, or resolved recent upper respiratory tract infection should be considered unequivocal indications for chest radiography. So airway, with the increased use of ultrasonogram, anesthesiologists, they started using for a preoperative airway assessment, but definitely it is not one of the important preoperative airway assessment tools. So the routine preoperative ultrasonographic airway assessment is not suggested for predicting difficult laryngoscopy. What is validity time for previous investigations? It refers to the acceptable interval from time of previous testing for any purpose to the current preoperative evaluation. So recommendation 10A says that the acceptable validity time for previously performed normal complete blood count, renal function test, liver function test, coagulation profile is suggested to be 2 months, provided the clinical condition of the patient has not changed in the intervening period. Recommendation 10B says that the acceptable validity time for previous performed 12-lead ECG, which is normal chest X-ray, suggested to be 12 months, provided the clinical condition of the patient has not been changed in the intervening period. What does the ASA guideline say? So the test results obtained from the medical record within 6 months of surgery generally are acceptable for patient's medical history, provided the medical history has not changed substantially. But more recent test results may be desirable when medical history has changed, like test results may play a major role in selection of anesthetic technique used. For example, regional anesthesia in the setting of anticoagulation therapy. These are my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anindita. That was a very crisp presentation, and you have compared the ISA guidelines with the ASA guidelines. Thank you very much for that. And let's see how judicious we are when we are ordering investigations subsequently.
Yes.
Let's look into the chat box if there are any questions for both of you. Many people have congratulated Dr. Anup for his presentation. There's one question to Dr. Anup. They have asked whether there is any pseudo-anatomy variation if it is a prefixed brachial plexus.
To be very frank, I haven't encountered such variations till now, but probably what we might see is a bubble that is coming above C5. So probably a C4 twig coming into C5 and joining the trunk. Ma'am, do you have any experience with this?
Yeah, actually we have done plenty, maybe around 200 or 300 scans, but have not seen the C4 joining the C5 and forming the upper trunk. It's been C5, there have been plenty of anatomical variations of C5, like what you mentioned, not in the interscaling group, but inside anterior scaling, inside or anterior to the anterior scaling muscle. So C4, I have not identified.
Yeah, that's what.
No, shall I add? I'm Dr. Anil here.
Yes,
the
sir.
question was asked by me. The thing is, it is not possible to identify because this upper trunk occurs beyond the scalene groove. Means after when it emerges out of it, and this joining contribution of C4 occurs well before that, which cannot be identified through the ultrasound. That was the point I just wanted to make, because the incidence in the recent literature, the prefixed blockade, the brachial plexus is almost 25% to 48%. That's what the recent literature says is the highest incidence, whereas the post-fixed brachial plexus block is around 2 to 5%. Though it is prefixed, it doesn't make any difference for the anesthesiologist regarding the upper trunk block. It doesn't make any difference. It looks same because we cannot identify actual contribution because it lies well behind the scalene muscles, which we cannot identify when you come down. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ma'am, actually, I wanted to add one more point. It was Dr. Anil sir who initiated this interest in truncal blocks. To me, he is our associate professor, and we together have started doing this. So he is the one who has initiated that interest in me.
Yes, Dr. Anil has appreciated you.
Dr. Shripriya, one question to you, because you have done so many, the blocks using, especially the phrenic nerve sparing blocks, as you are talking about, using very, very small volume like 3 ml or 4 ml.
Yes, sir.
So any failures
Sir, we actually conducted a volume finding study in our institute to see if we are injecting it was published in IJA in 2021. So to find out what is the minimum effective volume to have a successful block in terms of successful surgery. So we found that 3 ml in the upper trunk and 3 ml in the middle trunk was more than enough. For the inferior trunk alone, we need around 4.5 ml. So with the 3 ml, sir, we can actually, the image what I showed you with the contrast, it's not just at the point of injection. If I say it is the superior trunk, it's not just at the trunk. When we inject 3 ml subepidural, the subepidural becomes a very important thing because it is a contained compartment. So it spreads both proximal and distal. We can identify in that contrast image that proximally it has gone to involve the C5 and the C6 nerve root also. And distally also it has spread up to the level of the division. So we are able to achieve around 10 to 12 centimeter along the brachial plexus, along the entire neck that it has spread. So the effect will be the same, whether we are giving 20 ml like what was previously done. But it was, we didn't see where we are injecting. If we see what is the advantage we gained by using nerve stimulator over landmark guided is we couldn't see anything, but we know we were close to the nerve. But what is the major advantage now with ultrasound? We know where we are injecting. From the spread, we can identify which is the connective tissue we have actually breached. So these are the advantages we can. Subepidural injection, if we have to say, it becomes an intraneural injection, but we should not be piercing the perineurium. Subepidural is still a compliant space which accommodates local anesthetic volume without causing an increase in pressure and ischemic risk. So subepidural injection can still be performed. So by this, it spreads both proximal and distal. That point I wanted to add to Dr. Anup was that yes, suprascapular nerve separates out, but because of this proximal spread, it gets involved when the drug spreads proximally. It may not happen if you are giving a subparaneural compartment. In that case, you have to inject above, below, medial, and lateral. Like what you said, give half the volume above and half the volume below. So we know that everything gets involved. But here the advantage is we need the epineurium and it is very contained. So we are adding, apart from distance to the phrenic nerve, we are also adding connective tissue layers between the upper trunk and the phrenic nerve, which decreases the intensity of block of the phrenic nerve. So that is what we identified, sir. We are routinely using 12 to 15 ml in Mahatma Gandhi, like both for supraclavicular and the truncal block.
Now, because the volume is so important, because if you give a slightly higher volume,
yes,
majority of the times even the phrenic nerve may also get involved.
Yes, by increasing the volume, phrenic nerve gets involved.
Definitely.
And epidural with a higher volume, it may even spread into the epidural space. So the entire advantage is again lost. We don't need to give 10 ml and we can, once we do, the people who are routinely doing ultrasound, after injecting the drug, we do a dynamic scan and see. That is the biggest advantage. We can scan above and below and see whether the local anesthetic has spread. And once we see the local anesthetic spread has occurred, then we are very confident that the block will work. Nothing like we'll have a patchy block or a failure. So dynamic scanning to see that the spread has adequately occurred. That becomes the biggest advantage with ultrasound.
No, because it is said that if you increase the volume, the local anesthetic can even move up. And
yes, sir.
Actually, it can even include the deep cervical plexus and superficial cervical plexus together.
Yes,
naturally,
yes,
the phrenic nerve also gets involved.
Yes, sir.
That is always.
So what we identified is 3 ml is adequate for a subepidural superior trunk block. That is what is our finding.
With respect to that, what is the duration you're going to achieve with 3 ml of local anesthetic?
Yeah, we have to follow that up with the subsequent studies, but we were successful up to 2 to 3 hours of all surgery, upper limb surgeries which are happening. Yeah, 2 to 3 hours and adequate pain relief for around 4 to 5 hours post-operative. We were able to achieve that.
Okay, with any additives, ma'am, or exclusive?
No, no additive. We used for these, when we are going down on the volume, we are not able to rely only on a long-acting local anesthetic. Although combination of local anesthetic is generally, that is a point of controversy. They say we have to avoid it. But when we go for low-volume blocks, by using, if we use only 0.5% bupivacaine, we may have to wait for 15 to 20 minutes for the block to set. We don't know whether it is acting or it is due to the drug. So we generally use a combination. And when we are using around 12 ml, using 6 ml of 2% IO with adrenaline and bupivacaine doesn't matter. We are not going to exceed the toxicity dose at all. So this, we always have found that using a drug combination is beneficial to assess the block, to assess its effect as well as on the duration without compromising it.
And to add to one more point, what we do is instead of giving a total superficial cervical plexus block, we inject local anesthetic over the middle scalene muscle. That will cover the supraclavicular nerves. That will be sufficient for clavicular surgeries instead of going in for a full-fledged superficial cervical plexus block that gives a numb jaw or a numbness over the ear.
So as you advance, you will begin to identify the
supraclavicular nerves as well.
You can go, we can easily identify two. Actually, there are three. There's a medial, intermediate
and lateral.
That under ultrasound, we can see those two small structures which are traveling lateral. If you are giving as a superficial cervical plexus block, again the same problem. We are close to the phrenic nerve. Everything is emerging there out. When we go distally, that is when the, like what you said, the two small supraclavicular nerves lie over the middle scalene, and that is a good thing. So as you progress, you will be able to detect these small nerves and then become more specific. We hardly give 0.5 to 1 ml for the supraclavicular nerve. And we know that itself is causing a good spread. And yes, that is very good. And you have done a lot of observations and you gave a lot of tips apart from your superior trunk block also regarding the safety. That was very nice, Dr.
Thank you.
So over to Dr. Meenakshi.
And regarding the preoperative investigations that has been, the guidelines that has been published by the ISA, I think it was, really required, especially for medical legal concerns also, because now definitely we can rely on these guidelines. Suppose, you have not done a particular investigations and you are dragged into the court of law. Definitely these guidelines are going to help us a lot. So that is a real welcome move from the ISA. We should appreciate.
Yes, sir. There are two important points here. They are ASC 1 and 2 patients they are talking about, elective surgeries. And the second thing is they have also mentioned it is at the discretion of the anesthesiologist and the situation that ordering extra investigations can be made.
So before we go for formal vote of thanks, I personally thank Dr. Sri Priya, Dr. Gurudat, Dr. Anup and Dr. Anindita for a wonderful session. And the way in which Dr. Sri Priya, Dr. Anup and Anil Kumar was discussing, I was listening like a kindergarten kid there, because my knowledge about this superior truncal block is only skin depth, not nerve depth. It is only skin depth. And when I was a postgraduate, my chief used to say, you give 40 ml of 1% lignocane so that it will block the entire brachial plexus. So I have delivered a lecture in Pune, this regional analgesia conference. At the time I said, it is just like watering a tree by opening a dam. Either the water will find the root or the root will find the water. But now how it has become, they are talking about 15 drops, 8 drops only to be given. Now Dr. Sri Priya is giving only 40 drops, not 41. It will block phrenic nerve. So I have to count the drops. She is saying 0.5 ml for suprascapular nerve. Then I have to block only with the insulin syringe. Anyway, it is eye opener. We have to have insulin syringe at the same time ultrasound machine also. I hand over the thing to Dr. David, our treasurer, to propose vote of thanks.
Good evening to all. First of all, I would like to thank our mentor, Dr. Alam sir, for excellent academic arrangement. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank today's chairperson, Dr. Sri Priya ma'am, additional professor AIMS, Mangalagiri, and Andhra Pradesh for sharing your wonderful experiences. Thank you, ma'am. And special thanks to Dr. Gurudat sir, professor, head of Department of Anesthesia, JSS Medical College, Mysore, for excellent presentation about the workstation. Thank you very much, sir. And also thanks our speakers, Dr. Anup and Dr. Anita, for a wonderful academic session. I thank President Dr. Suresh Kumar sir and Secretary Dr. Perisam sir and other faculties, postgraduate, and our sponsor Acurula and A1 Logics for making this event successful. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
sir. Thank you.